In this lecture, I want to show you a sort of business framework which is called Blitzscaling. I'm saying this is a sort of business framework because this is also a sort of mindset that we're going to see why. But in any case, Blitzscaling, it's really a process of uh, prioritizing on speed over anything else. And the term comes from the book Blitzscaling from the also LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman. Now, there is a lot of discussions around this concept, which really is about prioritizing over speed, on speed over anything else in really a scenario of high uncertainty, because what you're really facing at that moment is a threat of survival. So a lot of misunderstanding around this concept, and when people say blitzscaling is not a feasible model, is because they think that blitzscaling is a model that needs to be applied in any kind of scenario. But my opinion is that blitzscaling only needs to be applied in very narrow specific context. And one of those contexts is actually when the company is facing survival threats. It means that really the uncertainty is so high that the company doesn't even know whether in 6 months' time is going to survive to this market condition, because perhaps it may be attacked by, let's say, an incumbent, or for instance, a company that controls the market and as such is going to need to put all its resources on the table if it wants to survive in the first place. So this is what blitzscaling is about. It's both a defense and an attack mechanism where survival is on the table. The company doesn't even know if it's going to exist in a few months' time, and everything that it says to survive is actually speed and gain scale as quickly as possible to prevent to be killed on the marketplace. And that's where blitzscaling comes handy. Now, to understand blitzscaling, you need to understand that really is about scale, and so is about understanding that the company is going to use the different blitzscaling approaches, whether it's going to be a company of a size or another size, because as the company grows in size, it also changes nature. So it's a completely different creature compared, if we're having a company with a few dozen employees to a company that has many more. So this is you can see the classification that in the book, in the blitzscaling book, is given for each stage of growth of a company. Now again, this usually it's how the concept of blitzscaling is highlighted within the book, but I suggest this sort of framework and mindset is used when there is really survival threat. Now, blitzscaling really moves around three key elements, which are business model innovation. So in the book, it is highlighted how, in order for a company to really blitzscale successfully, there are three core elements that the company wants to master. For instance, if you're a company that is in this stage here, then things like business model innovation are more important. Where if the company is much bigger and then really the threat is on the organizational side, then those aspects like management innovation and growth strategy are extremely important. So again, there are three elements of blitzscaling, which is business model innovation, management innovation, and growth strategy. These might apply very well, especially at the beginning where the company is still figuring out a really viable business model. And then once this is figured, the next step is really mostly about management innovation and keep growth built within the business model of the company to prevent stagnation. Now, I highlighted within the blitzscaling book, I really extracted some of the key elements that are highlighted within the book that make really blitzscaling possible. One really is about the four key growth factors that make blitzscaling possible according to the book, and two are the two growth limiters. For the four key growth factors within the book, there are highlighted things like market size, distribution, high gross margins, and network effects, where instead for the two key growth limiters, we have things like lack of product market fit and operational scalability. For a company to be successful at blitzscaling, at least from a business model innovation standpoint, those are the key elements that are taken into account. So once again, blitzscaling is a very important concept, I believe, but it needs to be applied in very narrow context where speed becomes the most important thing that you can have as a company, just because the scenario is highly uncertain.